Nigel, thanks for coming in and seeing us again.
No
On to
problem.
part 3 now. Previous episode was the Cops and Pads.
That's right.
Match Lake, sorry.
Match and Cops.
And
yeah.
now you're going over to the dark side, as you called it, over the other side of the road.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit to us about the car park lake.
The car park, back in the day, reputed as rock hard, weedy, gin clear, which what comes with weedy waters really. Very low stock. I think the lake's about 8 or 9 acres, 12 carp in it.
And some historic fishing here as well.
Yeah, well, it's made its history with Robin Dix catching ever the lever at £40 back in, I think it was 1985, something like that, June the 18th, 85. So start of the season, £40 lever carp getting caught. It was known to be in there at smaller weights. I think Springate caught it at £26 5 years beforehand, but yeah, Robin Dix was the one that sort of turned a few people's heads with that fish. And yeah,
it's big fish for back then as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, very big fish back then, and the lever carp as well. And I was about a year out of school then, got to hear about this fish. It was like the year after, the year after Richie McDonald caught Basil from the North Lake as well. So that side of the road was making headlines when I was sort of a teenager. And you're talking 10 years on, 1995. Well, it's 94 when I was on the Cops Lake, so I was planning on going over there in 95, 10 years time. But spent a lot of time marvelling at pictures of those fish. Like there's other captures from, after Robin catching Heather and, Richie's capture of Basil. So I was faced with going over what I call the dark side, the sort of the more famous Yateley lakes with the low stock, slightly bigger lakes as well, except for the Pad Lake. Low stock, historic fish caught by the known or the famous or whatever you want to call them anglers of the time.
So it got your juices flowing basically.
Yeah, it's like a bit of
There's a natural progression as well to.
Yeah, natural progression. I always wanted to fish them lakes before I ever went on the Match Lake and that side of the road, but it was sort of frowned upon being a youngster to go and tackle these lakes, which these hardened carp anglers or grown men were fishing. If you walked around there, they'd always try and elbow you towards the Match Lake sort of thing. Should be go over there, catch a few 20s, lad, and all that lot. Probably didn't want me to steal their thunder, I don't know.
So where's you said there was a really good atmosphere on the previous 2 lakes that you fished, Cops.
Brilliant atmosphere.
And was it different on the other side though?
No, it wasn't different. The atmosphere was the whole of Yateley really. It's very welcoming. There's brilliant social scene. There's a lot of hours without bites, so there's a lot of time sat around chatting and drinking beer and teas and smoking and barbecues and whatever goes with carp fishing really. Brilliant social atmosphere. If you think about it, back then there was no mobile phones really. There was only just a couple of people, Jeff Pink and Rob Malin had mobile phones on the dark side, as I call it, back then. And maybe a couple of other people who had good jobs, but that was a rare thing. So to communicate, you walk around and talk to people. You weren't texting across the lake or on WhatsApp groups and stuff like that then. So.
And a lot of what you say when you're reading through your book, obviously, to let everyone know you'd caught a fish back then, it was shouted across the lake.
Yeah, people shout it you'd hear the holler go up, a certain named fish would get caught. So that was how you tended to find out.
Right. We've got a picture of the map actually of as best as we can get, because there's not that many decent images.
Yeah, it's Google image, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the car park. So let's talk about the lake itself. Was it you're saying the other side was maximum extraction, so fairly flattish bottoms? Was this a bit different this side?
This is a bit different. It's a slightly deeper, deeper than the Cops Lake, similar depths to the Match Lake, standard Blackwater Valley gravel pit really, probably taken down to about 8 or 9 feet. Get as much gravel out as they could. The car park did have a few shallow features in it though, down in the sort of car park end. There was a couple of them.
Which is obviously...
Yeah, down this end, yeah. And up the top you can see the very shallow bar showing up there.
Yeah.
And again, off of Trumpton's, a little point on the right hand side there as we're looking at it.
Should be
straight out there's a shallow area. And there were a fair few other features in there, but there were some shallow features left in the lake. Whether they was meant to become islands when the lake filled up after excavation, I don't know. But it had a bit to go at, a bit of what carp like, shallow areas and slightly deeper areas and that. Obviously the weed I mentioned earlier.
Very weedy lake, or
very weedy.
Yeah.
You know, historically, well, it was different the year I went on there, but we'll talk about that as we go on, really. But I don't know why. It's a bit of a lucky year for me, really. The lack of weed in the lake, really.
So give you a chance to sort of find a few spots. And
Well, it did help, yeah. I think there's probably one of the first algae blooms started up that year on there, and I think since my day on there it tended to get worse and worse. I don't think nowadays the car park lake's ever clear, whereas before, you know, as I started on there, it's gin clear, absolutely tap clear. You know, put glass in the water and take a glass of water out of the lake and you wouldn't even know there's water in the glass, like, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So being obviously having the algae bloom coloured the water and killed a lot of that weed back.
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
So it gave you more.
I think, you know, in time that's what had happened, you know. So.
Okay, so going back to the stock in there, so you're saying it's around 9-10 acres, we'll say, something around that sort of, and you've got around, in total, how many carp were in there?
There was 12 carp in there, 9 of them were mirrors, 3 of them were commons, and that was it.
And let's just run through some of the names of them fish that you've got in there that were on your list of.
Easier to start from the top was heather, main prize, you know, £40 leather carp. That was the, you know, if you caught heather, you got off the lake, red card job. Next down from heather, a fish called single scale that just gone £40 in 94, autumn 94. Kevin Woodrow had caught it at £40 an ounce. I think £40.14, I think it was. Then next back from that, you had a fish called Arthur, rarely caught, hadn't been caught for about 2 years, you know, up to when I started on there. It was like a bit elusive. I think Bernie Loftus had caught it 2 years before that, £32, something like that. The pecking order, we didn't realise that sort of transpired as my year went on. But yeah, back from them 3 main big uns, you had Dustbin, Big Orange and Chunky. They were like the 3 mid-30s. Then you had Little Orange, Pearly Tail, Uglo. I think that covers them all, the mirrors. And then you had 3 commons. I think 2 of them were like £20 scrapers, upper double £20, and there was one that they called the Big Common, which was an upper 20, 26, £27.
Which we got a picture of that a little bit later.
Yeah,
on,
we have.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is just run through what we're talking about now, and then at the end, for everybody watching, what we'll be doing is just sort of going through the pictures and the stories behind them. So, in terms of the way you approached Car Park, obviously you had 2 really good seasons on the light side, if we call it, on the other side of the road. So did you just take those tactics across, or was it like, right, got to go right back to scratch here and start from the beginning again, different approach, different setups?
Well, it was a case of I'd done what I had to do on the other side of the road, and for me, needed some money, so go and get some work. Like, luckily where I lived there was a lorry yard next to my house, so being in and out of the removal trade for quite a few years, you know everyone in the trade. So I remember just looking out the window. I think he's got a picture here actually of that part of the lorry part there.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
And you see on the right hand side there's some removal lorries, and you know there's a blue one there. You just about see the writing on it, all move services. Yeah, I remember phoning him, that chap up who owned the company, just told him my experience and got some work with him. So I pretty much worked through the winter, but a lot of what I needed money for was obviously like to save money so you could take a bit of time out to do some fishing, which didn't really work out that way. But I was going over to fish for fish that I dreamt about, like as a kid, you know, sort of seen Richie McDonald catch basil and then Robin Dix's capture of heather. You know, I've decided I'm going to go on the Car Park Lake because it was the quieter of the 3 lakes over there. But you don't want to go and tackle the water like that undergunned. So then I sort of realised the stuff I'd used on the match and the cops was, you know, fit for purpose on there, but I probably needed something better. So I need to upgrade my rods, my reels, my bite alarms, you know, and a few treats like new bank sticks and new shelter, like an oval brolly and that. But yeah, I remember I got lucky and got a set of rods off my mate quite cheap. No, I thought they were quite powerful rods.
What were they, out of curiosity?
Well, it's quite funny. At the time, I looked at them as being really powerful rods, like, and I even said when I got my hands on them that I wouldn't use any rods. I would never get any rods even stiffer than them. And they were 12'6", 2 3/4. I think that was Kevin Maddox Tridents. Yep. Oh, brilliant rod of their day. In fact, they were a distance rod in their day. I bought a set of them cheap off my mate. He'd hardly used them, so that was a touch. At the time, there was some new reels come out. It was a buzzword. People were all wanting to get them. They were dire emblems with red backs on them. You know, they was slightly lesser model than the SS3000s, but you know they still had the same sort of gearing and spool capacity, and that, so they sort of fitted quite well on the rods. Yeah, say trip up to Steve Neville, get myself some new bite alarms and some stainless. Yeah, you know the alarm's obviously important. Stainless is a little bit of a treat to go with it, and new shelter and what have you. You know, it costs money, doesn't it? So you know, removals is never a highly paid job. You work for your tips as well to try and bump up your money. So there's a tip for the viewers here: if you move your house, give the lads a drink if they do a good job. But you know, it all helps, doesn't it? But you know, I geared my stuff up to fish for these fish. Like, I didn't want to take chances and risk losing one through being undergunned, you know.
100%, yeah.
Tactic wise, it was going to be a case of seeing what goes, really. Rig wise, sort of decided to use a rig. I think Terry had played with it for snag fishing on the Cops Lake, like a sliding ring on the back of a wide gape hook. I think he used a Drennan Boyley hook at the time. I think he's fishing the Royal Box snags, like an angle there and a pig swim. But yeah, beefy old setup. We managed to get some thinner braid, which seemed to be better than, I think it was Criston braids or something we was using at the time, but it's slightly thinner. It looked like a 22-pound braid that looked like a 6-pound mono, so it's like this could be the one in Clearwater to Carp Lake, you know. These fish are reputed as being rock hard and wary, and yeah, this sliding ring set up on the back of a wide gape hook, small pop up. You know,
and this is some of these rigs that I mean here, isn't it?
Those rigs that we had all, you know, like Terry is sort of the brains behind it for snag fishing, but they seem to work well, so we all, you know, like a few of us like Lewis and that we'd all played with them over the winters before, and that to go over that's, you know, side of the road and sort of just beef them up a little bit more, so like change of hooks. And you know, Maruta Kim Rui seemed to be a good hook, really sharp, strong and everything, you know. That was like the chosen rig that we chuck at them. But this, you know, we'll move on. Like, the plan was to start in June the 16th that year would be my start on the Carp Lake. But I think you mentioned earlier before we started chatting that
the close season.
Yeah, there was news like, I think it was January or February '95 that they decided to abolish the close season and we was going to be allowed to fish, and the angling manager Ian Welsh was agreeing to open up I think that was Leisure Sport Angling Waters at the time, or RMC, can't remember what. It's all the same company, it's just called different names, but decided to open up the waters, and which was massive gossip round the lakes. There was those for and those against, but you know, what do? Do you sit back and be a purist and not fish, or
I think some did, didn't they? You know,
some did, some didn't. You know, and it was a case of the choice was, what do you do about it, you know? And I thought, well, if everyone else is going to fish, so am I. You know, I'm going to join in. I'm not going to sit back. I'm like, whether you agree with it or not, you can't change it. This is what's happening. So the plan had to be brought forward. Was, you know, was going to be fishing in the spring, and no one really knew what was going to happen then. So
well, because it was uncharted sort of territory, wasn't it? You know, the fish had been supposed to used to get in that period of no leads or bodies thrown at them, and then obviously you guys are getting to fish it. So did it fish better? I know obviously we're going to more your captures later on, but fishing during that close season, did a lot more fish come out than it's hard to judge, I suppose.
It was shocking, to be honest with you. You know, through being an angler for years beforehand, you always knew the end of the season, the last couple of weeks of the season was always good for maybe a bite as the carp wake up and more people start turning up to get that last hit of fishing. And but we never knew what would happen after that. You always had the thing when you walk around the lakes a few weeks or a week or so after season closed, there'd be fish all over the surface, but you couldn't get at them. So we knew this could be a case, but you didn't know how easy they would be to catch or not. So it was a case of sort of dip your nose in the water and see what happens, really. And my start on the Carp Lake ended up being, well, beginning of April, 5th of April, I think I went down there to fish. I had some time because I had planned to sort of give up my job and, you know, take the summer off, but with it being brought forward, I still needed to earn a bit more money. You got paid rent and everything else. So I was still doing some work on removals when the work was there and trying to fit the fishing in between. And I think the 5th of April was a chance I had to do some fishing. So I went on down.
So was you was you sort of working to fish? Should we say, in a way? Was it obviously you got to work to pay your bills and whatnot? But ideally, was you just sort of thinking, go work, do some time, then I'll get more time down that lake to fish?
Yeah, I mean, with removals, you can always get some work. There's always like a casual basis, like you don't have to work full time 9 to 5. They might only need you 3 days a week or 2 days a week. So you do that, earn some money, and fit your fishing in around it. Really, sometimes it's a full week, sometimes it'll be 6 or 7 days on the trot. So it was a case of there's no work, I'll go fishing for them few days.
So in your head, when you went onto the car park, did you sort of have set what days you were going to do, or was it just a case of whenever I can get down there, I'm going to be fishing it? Or did you think, Monday to Thursday, like what you've done on some of the other lakes? Did you have something set in your head as to how
it was
you were going to
more
fish?
A case of I'll go fishing when I get some time. You can't work other people's house moves around your own fishing. It's like that's when the work is. You go and do it. So
Okay, so can we just quickly go back to the map of Car Park? We'll just look at the lake again. Now, before we go into the lake again a little bit more, name some of the people that were fishing that lake at the time. Let's see who you're putting yourself up against.
Well, it's a strange one really, because I don't know why, but the lake had become quite quiet. I think Heather had been caught the August before a top weight. I think it was 45-14. A chap called Nigel had caught it. I think come from up north somewhere. But like I said earlier, she was the main prize, and when she got caught, that person gets a red card, and everyone else decides to stop fishing it because the big one's been out. It's not going to come out again that year. So
basically, if you had Heather, you was almost like you've had the prize.
Yeah. That's it. Move on to another
lake. A bit of an underwritten sort of,
It's like the old school way. And obviously that Nigel had caught Heather, and everyone who was fishing it. I think a chap called Paul Lanaway, Spike, Ian Castle. There was probably a few others were fishing it, and they decided, chuck the towel in. That's it. It's done for the year. That was like the done thing. But Kevin Woodrow had caught Basil out of the North Lake, and he loved the Yateley thing, and he carried on driving down, and he was dropping on the car park for the winter, like for the autumn and the winter, and he pretty much emptied the lake. He caught most of them through the autumn and winter. He had it to himself really, and he's been able to bait up and drop back in on swims he was baiting up, or he clocked things and pre-bait it ready for his return the following week. Really, when I live local, I walked it most days.
It was only a couple of miles from it, wasn't it? About 2 miles.
Well, probably not even that. I lived down the Hawley Lane, which is almost a straight road to Yateley. You could walk it really if you really wanted to, but I didn't. But Terry fished the winter hard, like full time on the North Lake all winter, and obviously with the news of it being open in the spring, close season, whatever you want to call it, he just carried on fishing through, and obviously to go and visit Tail or walk the car park lake, one way or the other, to go out to the North Lake, I could get a lap of the car park lake in as well, and I didn't see anyone really fishing it. It was quiet as left alone, and no one had sort of made that break to start fishing it. And I think a few of people were a little bit upset about it going to be open for the spring, or the purists or whatever you want to call them. But at the end of March, Terry caught Basil out of the North Lake, which was brilliant. He earned that fish, and probably one of the first ever forties caught in spring, close, the abolished close season. So the natural thing, North Lake, Basil, very lesser stocked. You catch that. He'd caught everything out there anyway, so he moved on to the car park lake.
Okay.
So Terry's on the car park lake, which is great. It's a mate of mine, so it was a bit of company. And the other thing you get when, like I said earlier, with Heather being caught, Basil being caught out of North Lake, there's other people like Jeff Pink and Dave Mallin and all them lads, the ones that would have been on the North Lake for that period of time. Basil's been out, no point going up there. We call them refugees. So they'd all drop on the car park lake. It's the next best lake. They'd do a few sessions on that before they went back up the North Lake, up the cold north as we called it. So there was a few a few hardened Yateley anglers. I mean, anglers like Dave Mallon and that, you know, they know their, you know the game. So it was a little bit intimidating. A few people who was around then, and obviously with Terry's capture of Basil, it starts drawing people out of their houses. Like, oh, this is like, it is the done thing, you know. It's like they're here to be caught in what it would have been the close season, you know.
So Terry was fished this through the winter before you went on there.
He fished the North Lake next to the Carp.
Oh right, okay.
Lake, yeah, and he'd caught Basil at the end of March, and then because he'd caught Basil, there's no point carrying on, so he literally swapped lakes straight on the Car Park Lake.
Okay, so the lake itself, like I said, let's just run through the lake. Did you when you went over there, did you choose certain areas, or was it sort of like, you know, you're just going to drop in where you see fish, or did you sort of find some spots and think, this is how I'm going to...
The plan was to, like, try and find fish and have a go for them. Like, that was simple as that, really. You know, find them and feed them and catch them, really. You know, there was no prep or anything in there. It was literally a case of see if we can find the fish. And strangely enough, all the walking I'd done through the winter and the early spring, and I still hadn't seen any fish right up till the 5th of April when I went to go and fish it.
Jeez, okay. So previous to what was a quite close fishing, this, I'm reading through your book, was you were sort of going out into the middle of the lake a little bit to find the fish.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ended up fishing out in the open water was when I turned up on the 5th, Terry was fishing down here. This is a little dot island down here. He was fishing a swim called the Island Swim. I think he's more being sociable because Rob Malin was virtually living in what was the first swim on the corner of the Pad Lake, as you can see it here. And well, it's actually just down off shot about where that bush says. But yeah, Rob had been sort of living in there, so Terry was almost having a bit of a social session after catching Basil, like back to back with Rob, really. And you know, I turned up to fish like you do, the sociable Yateley, have a chat with your lads and all that lot, and see what's going on and go and have a look, see if we can end up setting up. And I think Terry decided to wind in, so we both walked around the lake together. You know, both younger and keener, good at tree climbing and everything. Water's gin clear. It was a nice, bright, sunny, early April day. Sure, you're going to see something. The tench were well active in there. Like, you know, the lads who had been fishing were catching tench, like Al Taylor and Terry and that. I think that was a bit of a pain, to be honest. Again, it's early spring. You didn't know what was going to happen. Tench wake up and they're suckers for a pop-up sort of thing. But yeah, we walked round. We had a good look all day long. We climbed all the trees, looked in all the snags and everywhere. Wouldn't find no fish, and we should have. You know, if they was anywhere close in, we would have seen them. And it was a case of, well, can't find them all round the edges, so maybe they're out in the middle. So the 2 open water swims. I think Terry went for the Curly, which is just back to back with a split there, which controls the middle of the lake, and I went for a swim called the Bars, which is up off them shallow areas, which you can get an angle out to the middle of the lake, and there's like a close in bar round to the right, and that was a good enough choice. It was more a case of might as well fish next to a mate. First session on there, it's his first session. We'll just get up early and watch the water in the morning.
Yes, you got good
put the rods out and some half decent spots of drops and see what happens. And if carp show in the morning, we'll hopefully be able to get on them or see where they are and move baits accordingly, you know.
So it was a boilie approach again?
Yeah, just boilie approach.
Monster Pursuit again, was it? And you had some little specials that you added in?
No, I mean, I think I had some, at the time, Amber Attract boilies. It's like an ash one, like some Scopex, just something I like using, bird food bait with some like Scopex and some cream on it. It's worked well for me in the past, so stick to what you know, didn't you? It's like, didn't really know what to do, really. It was the first spring, you know, you didn't really know what was going to happen. Always worked well in the winter or the back end of the season, but we was going into uncharted time of the year, you know. So, yeah, really, that was the method of that first night on the Car Park Lake, and it was quite a sort of, I don't know, a nervous feeling, really, on this famous lake, fishing for the biggest lever in the country. And I'm sitting there thinking, I hope I catch one this year. Like, you know, people blank for years on that lake.
So you know, like the other lakes, I think you were saying Match Lake, if you had 3 fish a year, it was fairly average. This is a completely different kettle of fish, excuse the pun. But so you could blank for a season on here. Good angler could quite easily blank on there.
Yeah, easily.
So that was back to your first fish, which was...
That was Heather, yeah.
Heather was your first fish out of there. And how many nights had you done before you had Heather?
I've pretty much half told the story. We put the rods out. I put one on a close-in gravel bar in the bars just to the right, about 30, 40 yards out, catapult range for boilies, and the other rod I decided to sort of put out in the middle and fill the lead down and get a drop, like pop up out there, quite a high pop up. And it was like I said earlier, the plan was to get up early, watch the water, see if there's any signs of carp, and maybe move swims or move the hook baits accordingly to them. And I think Terry come up for, just as it was getting light, and, you could hear the dawn chorus in the spring. It's lovely, isn't it? Starting to get it at the moment.
Starting now, isn't it?
And it was just sort of like sat there drinking teas, watching it get light. So the odd tench slopping about. I was quite surprised actually, because I hadn't caught any tench, and they had, quite a few lads that said they was being a bit of a pain. And I was starting to think maybe my rigs ain't up to this, or maybe they weren't cast out as well, And while we're sitting there, sort of watching the dawn, scanning the water and that, I think it was my left hand rod just pulled up tight, just literally not fast, just slowly pulled up tight. Bite. Bearing in mind I'm looking at all my nice brand new tackle as well, and it's quite nice to see the first bite. And I've never been one to panic anyway, and I can remember just watching the bobbin stay at the top and the line ping from the clip, and literally glance at the spool on my emblems and just see it slowly start ticking round and getting faster. And of course, obviously, kick its sleeping bag off your legs and get on the rod, bent into it, and I think it kited left. And I thought it's got to be a tench. It's heading up onto the main bar. You can see there the sort of
so you was at the top left of the lake here, wasn't you? And it's kiting up to the left now.
Kiting towards that, so I just wind in and sort of drawing, trying to gain a bit of line on it, and then it just turned as it got to the bar and then swam straight towards me. So I'm winding quite fast. I mean, Terry didn't seem to be panicking. He just carried on sitting down, watching what was going on, and I can remember just winding, and there was it's like flat calm, sort of half light and misty, and I could see my line getting closer and closer. There's like little boards in the front of the swim, the bars swim it's called, quite a deep margin there. And I remember seeing my line getting closer and closer and closer, and I was expecting to see like a tench come up and slop over, like pop up hanging out of its mouth. And literally as I was, my eyes focus, I just see the shape of a carp coming towards me, and it's literally got right up to under my feet where it could see the bank, and you see it stick its pecs out and literally turn 180 degrees and just bolt out.
So but your heart's in your mouth now.
But then I remember just going, it's carp, and obviously trying to hit the anti-reverse off and adjust your spool and that, and then just an epic battle followed on from that. It was probably 15-20 minutes worth.
Really? So it's a long old scrap then.
But as the fight went on, it didn't seem to know what it was at first, But it's getting lighter and lighter as the fight went on, and I think at first we both thought it might be single scale. And I remember at the time just thinking, just don't fall off. I've actually gone and bloody hooked one of these carp. Don't fall off, And I think as the fight went on, we got better. I remember seeing there's like couple of white lines on one of its flanks as it come past us, like in the clear water, probably about 4 foot down. I remember thinking there was scales, so we thought maybe it might be that half a tail fish, But it's hard to make it out, and then the fight went on. I got it close, it went out. It knew the lake and knew what it wanted to do. This fish did, and I remember I think one of its last few passings, like before it sort of blew its tanks and come up. So I remember I wasn't using lead core at the time, I was using bits of putty on the line, so you could almost see the fish tiring coming closer to the top. With these bits of putty was staying above water and that. And I remember
you knew you had him near them.
I remember Terry's by then knelt down on the boards with the landing net waiting and that. And I remember him turning to me and saying, "Mate, I think you got Ever on there." And you can imagine, my heart dropped,
adrenaline,
anxiety kicking in and everything, because of old, before you ever go to Yateley and that, you hear all the stories, and I'd heard stories of so-and-so hooked Basil, hooked this on his first night and lost it, and he's still on there 5 years later. All this is going through my head, and I didn't want to be that person that hooked Ever on my first morning and lost it, and then spent the next 5-10 years trying to catch her. But yeah, that was everything held firm, good strong kit, you know.
So the new equipment paid off?
Yeah, upgraded tackle and everything, rods and reels and everything paid off. Or, you know, rigs were perfect, you know, that good. The hook stayed in. It was, well, when I come to unhooking it, it was like trying to pull the hook out. It was like a axe embedded in a lump of wood, you know. I had to get forceps on it and that to, you know, actually help with the pressure on the hook to get it out of her mouth. But yeah, I couldn't believe it really. I remember when Tail put the net round it and I could drop the rod. I remember I just put the rod against what we called Pad Lake bush, which was on the right hand side of the swimming. I think probably Richie Curtis had planted it and transported it from the Pad Lake to a privet or something like that. I remember just walking around in circles thinking, oh my God, what have I just done? I've just gone and caught like almost a childhood dream on my first night on this rock hard lake, like 16 hours after casting out. And it's like heaven the levers in my net, and the last known capture was just under £46. Could be a late record as well.
So now your heart's really in your throat.
And I remember Terry actually saying, well, come and have a fucking look at it, mate, you know. And I remember I walked over and looked over in the boards at the front of the swim, and there's this landing net there, and all I could see was the head of Heather staring up at me and her tail dropped down deep. And it just reminded me of another picture that had inspired me was, I think it was might have been on a big carp or
have we got some photos that quickly? We did have
some.
These are what inspired you. This is what inspired you to go and fish, and this is now one of the fish you got in your net.
Yeah, well, those were, you know, those pictures were from when I was getting my gear ready. Like I sort of left them on the lounge floor while I was working through the winter, and that the two main prizes ever in single scale there, Richie Curtis and Ian's Castle. But the actual view I had of Heather laying in my net was like, I think it was a picture of Don Norris holding it. It might have been another big carp magazine. It's just like a head-on of Heather with her overslung mouth, and that's what I was looking at with my like rig hanging out of its mouth. It's like,
I mean, describe the feeling. If you
it's just mind blowing. You just can't, you know. You just think, wow, you know, am I dreaming this? You know.
But Terry was over the moon for you as well.
Well, he was like, you know, fair play, mate. I'll go and get some help. Obviously, you don't have phones, do you? So we went down the path, and
you didn't let out the shout then.
No,
not really.
You know, I don't do that. You know, that's for other people. I remember Terry's gone off down the path to go and get Rob Malin and another chap called Al Taylor, who's a friend of Rob's. He was actually a North Lake refugee that was fishing on the car park. No, this is different now. Right. Okay, but yeah, they came up with scales and all that lot. And, you know, I think we had a bacon sandwich and got the pictures sorted. You know, like, yeah, absolutely. I remember while they're cooking a bacon sandwich, you know, we've got the biggest leather carp in the country, main prize of the car park lake in my net. You know, in the sack, waiting to be photographed. And I remember actually feeling sick, like I wanted to throw up. All I wanted to do was get photos done of that fish, get it back in the lake, so I didn't want to be responsible for it, you know. No. You know, you talk, I don't know, you're responsible for a main prize in carp fishing, and you really don't want to harm it or have it die in a sack or anything, you know. It's like, yeah, I just want it. You wanted to hold it, but you wanted rid of it as well. You know,
you do with big fish. You want to get them bagged, don't you, for someone else to enjoy and whatnot.
But you know, like for at least 10 years of me carp fishing, it's like dreamt of catching a fish like that, and then bang, it's done. Within.
So we'll see some pictures of it in a minute. But you've caught that fish. We'll go more about how you felt when you held it. But so you've caught the one you want, the trophy fish out of the show. When you caught that, was you a little bit sort of like, oh, it's happened so quick? Oh God, you know, or do you think? Well, no, obviously, you still got more to go for.
It was quite funny because I think it might have been Rob said to me then, "Well, that's a red card now, then, isn't it? North Lake." And I'm thinking, my God,
I've only just started.
It's been thrown up, you know. And I remember Terry going, "Nah, mate, nah, there's more in here than just ever now. It's not that kind of lake anymore." And he actually said, "You got to stay on here, mate." And I was thinking, that's quite nice to hear it. He's sort of actually got permission off someone on the lake to stay on it, you know, because the done thing was get off, like, you know, out of respect for other anglers who spent a lot of time fishing for that fish. But when you looked around you, there wasn't anyone, you know.
So just reading through your book as well, I think I don't think he meant in a bad way, but Rob Mailing was sort of saying you were maybe advising not to go on there. Did I read something in the book that was sort of trying to swerve you off of it? Was he trying to talk you in fishing other lakes first, or?
No, that was the sort of before you went on those lakes, the general thing was they hoped you'd go and fish on the match and that side of the road before you stepped up to these big fish waters. I mean, what you got to look at is I was 27 years old at the time. Terry would have probably been 23, 24. We were quite young to be on fishing them lakes, we were the youngsters. I mean, what went on after catching Heather, we had Chris Ball come down from Carp Talks. He wanted to do interviews with both myself and Terry, and it's like, I think I remember the headline was the Yateley Young Guns or something like that.
It on Carp
and it was sort of like it was almost like Terry and myself had proved that younger anglers could go and catch these big fish that the older anglers were targeting, and that lot, it's made a bit of a thing of it, in the press. Obviously, the rest is history since then. But yeah, there's a lot to take in from walking through that gate on the 5th of April, wondering how long this was going to take. My initial thoughts was, knowing it was hard, would it break me? Could I cope with it? And I hoped that I'd catch 40 before I was 30 years old. And in less than 24 hours I'd done it.
It's just mad. That's crazy. Have we got a picture on there somewhere? I think we have a picture. That's your set. Can we just go back to his setup as well before we go back to the picture of Heather on there? So this was your new setup. So you got the old baboons there.
Yeah, it's the baboon reels, Neville bite alarms, stainless rods there. That's the actual swim.
Obviously,
yeah, that's the actual swim.
Was that the session?
God, it's hard to say, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the boards in the swim that the net was on. As you can see, there's not a lot of room there. There's enough room to stand on there, sort of closed in front. Yateley swim, Carp, as they call it these days.
Need the beard for that. Right?
But you can imagine playing a fish in there, and your netsman's now on them boards. He couldn't get in the water because it's too deep. Sheer, drop off margin there. So you're almost playing a fish over the top of his back, sort of thing.
Right. Okay, so we're going to have some deep runs and lunges.
Yeah, it's all under the rod tip fight. But yeah, obviously that spar swim, new setup there. Baboon reels, when they were the in thing to have at the time. I think they still are, aren't they? People pay silly money for them.
Dow sort of re-released the newer version of them, didn't I? Can't remember what they
called it. There's been several releases, I think, back to black on them now. I've still got my Yateley reels, like them reels, still. Well, I actually, in the first lockdown last year, I actually serviced them. They was all seized up, and I got them moving again, and they've been back out, and a few fish have been caught on them this winter.
Cracking old reels, lovely stuff. So let's go on that picture of Heather now. So
it's obviously on the mat. Well, I think you'll find that's probably an unhooking mat on top of a lilo. Ultimate fish care at Yateley.
And the lucky red para jumper on there as well.
Yes, that jumper, it became a bit of a thing with me, I think. It's like, it seems to be lucky, like it's in quite a lot of my pictures from here on. I think now a few companies actually sell jumpers. Like I've actually been sent a couple.
Set a trend, didn't
you?
Yeah. you and tell.
You never know, you might one day.
Well, yeah, there's no chance of that happening. But right, let's go on to the second shot. There she is. Wow. And we were sort of saying in here earlier, all the team and whatnot, that these were the days of film. It wasn't digital.
No, that's 35mm.
Terry took
slide film, yeah.
It was like I say, half the time he was waiting for it to be developed.
It's like 3D, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an amazing shot and a big history. I bet you're shaking trying to hold her up.
Adrenaline takes over, really. She's actually, I don't know, beforehand. I think she had a few moments on the bank beforehand. I think a couple of people might have had black eyes or split lips off her and that.
It's a bit of an handful.
Yeah, she likes to wriggle around on the bank. And she was actually well behaved with me. I think she had a couple of little wobbles and that, but she had a good hard fight as well. But, I won that. But she's quite well behaved. I mean, I don't remember her being heavy to pick up. I remember just holding her up and the lad saying, that'll do, good pictures. Like, couple in the water and let her go, really. I was very lucky, I had Terry taking pictures and Rob Mailing, only 2 cameras, that's all you need. You don't need a big gallery of cameras all climbing over each other. A couple of other people there helping out with pouring water on the fish or helping turn it round on the mat for you and that lot. Goalkeepers, as they're called.
Yeah.
But like I say, there's, as you can see, I think that's not just an unhooking mat, that's like a lilo blown up under there. That fish ain't hurting itself, even if I just clean dropped it, you know.
So, obviously, wow, first fish ever. This is April.
Yeah,
So your
April
first session
6th,
on here. And you do say through your book, obviously you've done quite well from a little while on from there, didn't you? And the summer went a little bit different for you, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, later April, I think April the 27th was my next bite. Crazy, really. My next bite was single scale. I think we've actually got a picture of that on there.
Is that next single scale on there?
Which at the time was second biggest, you know. And so basically my first two bites in there was the biggest lever and the biggest mirror.
And so what was the exact weight of Heather?
Heather was 45 pounds.
45
yeah.
money, and that's just a huge fish.
Massive for the time as well, you know.
Crazy. So, and your next fish was
single scale, which just scraped over the £40 mark, £40 an ounces. So
we'll see a picture of her in a minute. Now, one thing I did read in the book, obviously, is that you had Chris Ball come down.
Yeah.
Because I think yourself, Terry, and Rob, all had a 40, and it was good to try out 40s from different lakes.
Well, the old Yateley circuit is always about catching the big one from each lake and moving on. And we go left from right, really. I'd caught Heather, which was, you know, Chris come down, he heard that day. Terry had caught Basil a few days earlier, he's in the middle there. Okay, and I think that morning when Chris came down, whilst Terry and I was sort of like sat there drinking tea and chatting, we heard the shout out and Jumbo come from the Pad Lake, and Rob had caught the Jumbo out of Pad Lake for £41 something, I think it was 41.5, so we went and photographed it. But when Chris come down to do these interviews, myself and Terry, Rob was round because he was moving on to the car park as well, because there's no point in being on the Pads Lake because he just had the big one out of there.
You got rid of carded, as you say.
So yeah, there was, you know, that was it. The car park lake was getting busy. I had Rob Maley and Terry on there as well, and that is me, myself, Terry, and Rob sat on a bed chair. But we'd all caught the 80-40 each out of different lakes. The main prizes, basically. Bang, bang, bang. Like, unreal.
What a trio. Now, since that picture was released, then obviously the word went round and you're saying Yateley was a little bit different after that in terms of then everybody was thinking, got to get onto Yateley, and you saw an influx of anglers on there.
Well, I think it was a case of these fish were getting caught. This was like 3 weeks into the old close season, and each of the big ones have been out of each of the lakes at Yateley, and then people were starting to take note, you know, so it's starting to get a bit more traffic on there, a few more anglers. Obviously, I think I'd have to I'd have to work it out, but I'm pretty sure after Terry caught Basil, Jeff Pink caught it, someone else had caught it. You know, Basil was actually getting caught like every couple of weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks. So you imagine all them North Lake anglers were starting.
I think here we go.
Yeah, they catch Basil, they're not going back on the north, they're coming on the car park lakes. There's 2 40s in there.
Yeah.
After Kevin Woodrow had single, myself, I'd caught single at over 40, and obviously Heather being known. It's like 2 40s in the lake back then was quite something, you know. Like, it's going to attract people.
Still big now. Have you got a couple?
I was quite happy that my first 2 bites were the 2 main prizes, but there was also these other fish like Arthur, which started to see it in the snags and it looked big, could be £40, hadn't been caught for 2.5 years, you know. And then you had the other 3 big 30s, which it's a mega lake at the time, you know. Now 6 fish over £35 in a lake, you know, up to 45 in this day and age is a bit different, but back then mega, you know.
And those fish in there, I mean, were they getting that big on boilie, or was it purely just the water cleansed, you know, very clean water, ticked all the boxes for big fish?
It ticked all the boxes, had a lot of naturals in it, but they were known as boilie fish back then, you know. They'd been through the early stages, I think, with all the milk proteins and all that sort of side of things back in Robin Dix's day and that, and since then obviously you had the everyone knows of them as the Yahoo crew that came after the 88 squad. The Yahoo crew was made up of Premier Baits boys who fed them fish meals, glugged up fish meals, and lots of them. You know, Terry Pefferbridges and Jock Whites and that lot. You know, they fed them fish up and sort of like took them up the next level on boilies. And I'm pretty sure Kevin Woodrow was using Premier Baits or baits along them lines. You know, they were boilie eaters in the day. Obviously, in later times things change, but you know, people use different things. You know, so they had a bit of both to get them growing big.
Plumped
you know.
by the boilie basically, and you know, cherry picked on other
and
things.
You know, the biomass. There's only 12 carp in 8 or 9 acres. They're not.
So what amount of boilie was going in? If you was doing a typical session over 2-3 nights, if you got the chance, you'd do a 2-3 night session.
Quite happily put a few, 2 or 3 kilos out. I would. You know,
over the course of the time
you know,
you're there.
There was big hits of bait going in as well. Like, you know, as time went on, I noticed different things going on. People think nothing of putting a bucket of particles out.
Yeah, because there's some
big buckets
you've written in there, and I'm going to bring that up in a little while, because I think when things dried up a little bit for you, you saw an approach from 2 other northern guys, which is quite interesting.
Line,
but we'll speak about that in a jiffy. So your next fish, I think we've got it on here, was
that's single scale that I just mentioned. Yeah, that's my second bite, £40
and this was April, so this is roughly about 3 or 4
back
weeks
end of
after you'd
April.
had.
Mid-April had been a bit quiet and not a lot had happened. I think Terry had caught the dustbin off the bottom like mid-April, but that Kevin Woodrow had caught Heather again, after me. There hadn't been a lot go on in April, but yeah, back end of April I was in Curly, and I think I was just starting to pack up actually. You know, I hadn't had any bites or anything for the few sessions I'd done in between this session and Heather, and I was literally packing up because I had to go to work the next day, and my left hand rod went off with a slow steady take. Like, by the time I got to it, it was melting off, and bent into it. It was the most aggressive fight I've ever had off a carp from the off.
Still to
like
this day.
hooking a motorbike straight out into open water and kiting on a long line. Something not really experienced before was silkweed. Like the Canadian was coming up, and it sort of had this like light silkweed over the top of it, and I can remember getting a tight line to this fish, and it had come straight up to the surface, and it was kiting from left to right, heading towards the Trumpton's area, down towards the car park and the gate swim. But I remember having a straight line, a lot of line out of the water, and it was just like a washing line with silkweed all on it, which obviously we're talking late April when that stuff's abundant.
Green and squidgy and slimy.
Yeah, I remember this powerful fish on the end, and I was just like, my God, what have I hooked here? And I didn't know, just hope I'll get it in. And I managed to steer it round and get it this side of the island that's to the right of Desi's. Managed to get it all the way along the margins to the right. There's quite a lot of overhanging snags, sort of leaning out and just keep pumping and pumping and pumping. A little bit of a tussle under the rod tips, and that come up single scale. Again,
what was her weight again? Sorry,
that was £40 We knew it had done 40 in the autumn when Kevin Woodrow had it, but didn't know this time. And I remember I run down to the island swim where Terry and my mate Leroy was making some bait, like rolling it on the bank and saying, I've got one, I've got single, and give us a hand. And they run up, and I remember Terry looking in the net and saying, you want to weigh that straight away, mate? So
yeah, because there's a little story to that. And
we weighed it £40 and then put it in the sack and sorted the cameras out. And like literally when we got it out of the water, opened the sack up, there was a turd in there. It was like pretty much like a sausage, and probably weighed 4 ounces itself, and it was like that actual crap turd, call it what you may, was like, I don't know, a cereal bar, compacted cereal, like someone had been putting particles out. I knew where, on the lakes. One of the other anglers had put a lot of bait out by the old school bomb. You used to have to blow it up and paddle out at night. Under the cover of that. Yeah, I think it'd probably been on his bait and then swum up and just picked up a bait I had. It was a bit of a cheeky cast round in front of the bar swim, like a good line angle and that. But yeah, I couldn't believe it. Second bite.
Another
second
40.
Biggest fish in the lake, another 40 pounder.
And 2 40s on the spin when you'd not had a 40 before.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, like Heather and single were like the 2 main prizes, and I'd caught both of them, but I wasn't prepared to move on.
I was going to say, they must have all been throwing the red cards at you.
I don't think a few of them were that happy, but I stayed on, and through May I caught my next bite, which is funnily, I caught the biggest.
Got a picture of the next one on your projector, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my next bite was this one here. It's
and a PB common as well, this, wasn't it? So.
Yeah, at the time, it's like the big common in the lake. So my first 3 bites, this come from casting up, pop up along. I see fish patrolling along them shallow bars at the top of the lake, and managed to cast a pop up bang on line where they were. I think Terry he was on a higher bit of bank and could see where it landed. He said, "Yeah, bang on, mate." It didn't take long before this rattled off, being my 3rd bite. And my 3rd bite was the biggest common in the lake, so I'd had the biggest lever, biggest mirror, and the biggest common, like 3 bites.
And what weight was she there?
That I think is 26 something.
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's a cracking old common. Look at that.
Yeah, it's lovely, proper old common, isn't it?
And she scrapped you as well. Was you a hard fight at that one, or?
It was a strange fight, if I remember. It came in a bit sort of like in circles. I think it had a bit of weed round its face. Like there was a bit of weed coming up, and it just come in like it had a flannel on its face, and it was trying to do something, but it just, couldn't really see where it wanted to go in the shallow water.
It's quite handy sometimes when you get a big fish and they've got it masked a bit.
Yeah, makes it a bit easier, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this was, again, it's all still on the boilie approach.
Yeah, still on the boilies.
Was this April again when you had the common?
No, this was May time.
May time,
yeah,
okay.
And I had one other bite after this, which was back in the curly. As soon as I hooked the fish, I knew what it was again. And I think he's got a slide of that here. Literally, as soon as I bent into the fish, I thought, it's that single scale again. It just did exactly the same as it did the first time I hooked it. And it was spawned out a bit here. I don't know if you can see it on the wrist of the tail there. There's a couple of white marks, and I've cut the scales off and that.
Around the
back
over here, yeah.
Wasn't as big here. It's 38.10. I actually, when I netted it, I went and told Terry, I think he's down in one of the secret swims, and Rob was in the gate swim. They seemed to both be fishing each end of the lake, and I sort of like left to the middle at the time. But I remember telling them what I had in the net, and I was just going to let it go. And they was like, "No, mate, you need to get a picture just for reference." And I remember I wasn't keen because I'd caught it before and got good photos.
Yeah, you want it back.
But I agreed that I'd let them take a couple of photos and then I'd let it go. And this was just probably, I think there's probably 5 or 6 pictures of this fish. And to be honest with you, I couldn't wait to let it go because this wasn't happy on the bank. It absolutely kicked up the hell, like that time of year spawning, end of May.
They've had a good hiding already,
yeah. Didn't like being touched, didn't want to be picked up. And I didn't really want it on the bank, to be honest with you. So literally gained this photo and put it back.
Okay.
But that was the spring. That was my spring. There was a lot of other things went on that spring. May was just mental. Like there would be fish like the baby orange, and that would come out 3 times in 2 weeks. The dustbin had been caught. I think you flicked past a picture there earlier with Terry holding the dustbin. Which is just before that one there. That was, I think that was his
a cracking fish.
Awesome fish, isn't it? That was actually Terry's second capture of that fish.
And he caught that off the top, didn't he?
Yeah, that was the floater caught. They was all up taking floaters. Unbelievable. I think Northern John had got them going behind pole position on the Pad Lake. We'd both decided we was going floater fishing for the day, and I was in the curly, and Terry went off towards the North Lake end of the car park to check out Shallow Bar's end, expecting the cart to maybe on the top there. And I walked out in the end of the boards in the curly and looked to my right, and I could see Carp like nudging the surface and that. So I walked down towards the island swim and realised why Northern John, who was fishing pole position on the Pad Lake, was just pinging floaters out to see what had happened, and they was just troughing them. And this one was just going mental. And I actually cast at it, and it was taking mixers all around me, and I remember just glancing down at my reel to make sure everything was all right and that, and there was a big load of line all falling off the spool.
Pinged
and
off.
It literally, this was like a couple of yards from the hook bait, taking in a line heading towards it, and in the end I just put my hand over the spool and pulled the bait away from it, because I couldn't risk hooking a fish like that.
No.
And trying to untangle a reel. So I pulled, and I remember as I was like sort of trying to unravel it in the panic, these fish are having it, sort of thing. I remember seeing a controller come out from the middle secret. It landed bang on line. This fish carried on taking, bang, see the strike and the explosion. Terry hooked it.
And what weight was she then?
I think, for some reason, 35.7, something like that springs to mind.
And that's a notoriously hard lake, apparently, to get fish off the top.
Yeah, I think probably since my time on there, or probably each year, it probably maybe did 1, maybe 2 fish a year off the surface. It seemed like there's just them small windows. Because of low stock, it's hard to get them competing. You're just trying to get 1 or 2. But this particular day, they was all loving it. Unbelievable.
Do you remember there was a hatch going on or something as well? Was it something
just perfect conditions and that? And yeah, this one, I think this one's been caught a few times off the top. It does like a mixer for some reason, but it's like that little window that got hooked. It kited round to the secret swim in the corner or whatever it's called, and Terry had to swim round with his rod because it weeded him up behind a little bar in that corner, and I'd run round with the landing net to net it for him and that. But that commotion, fish being hooked, a bit of swimming going on, like people running about and that sort of thing. Them fish just spooked and ended up at the bar's end, just sunning themselves for the day. They didn't want to know, and floater fishing really didn't happen after that for quite a while. I think maybe Rob Malin might have been the next one to catch one off the top that year. It'll be later in the summer. But yeah, May was mad.
Crazy. So
you almost thought, when's this going to end? Like, you're not talking like bite after bite after bite, but there's
a lot of bites compared to what would normally be.
You're seeing these reputed hard fish getting caught 2 or 3 times in May, and
in a normal close season as well.
Yeah,
and so
But we didn't know this was going to happen either.
No, it was uncharted territory, wasn't it?
It became known in more recent times as clubbing season, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's quite funny, you talk about the modern day anglers and that. A lot of people these days have never experienced a close season, have they?
No.
So, like an angler in his mid-30s might never have actually fished.
Doesn't know any different.
Yeah, like had a close season in his life, or if he did, he would have been
a
very young man.
As well, 2 rods close season. Yeah. And they were 2 new big changes.
But yeah, I mean that's first a few more springs after that. It's still you didn't know a pattern. Was it the second close season like the year after this? You didn't know is it going to be as good, or are they going to wise up to it?
Just sort of spread out over the season.
But now we're talking 26 years on from that. We sort of know the pattern now. Everyone's got their little charts or dates in their diary.
Moon phases.
Get down there middle of May. Bang up. Yeah.
So you've had a few out now. Towards the end of May, and things are starting to quieten down a little bit for you now.
Yeah, they quietened down for me after May. Struggled. The lake started getting harder. Obviously, more people going on there. And you've got the purists who didn't want to fish during the close season starting to turn up because you're moving into June the 16th, original season time.
Yeah. And
the water started colouring up. It's not good. Like an algae bloom on there. It's everything was sort of against you. I think that it's scratching time back to rock hard. Like car park as you'd expected it to be,
So it all went very quiet for quite a few of you on there, and then there was something in your book about 2 Northern lads turned up, and took a completely different approach by lobbing in big balls of ground bait.
It's something you learn from, isn't it? And I can remember, I think it's one evening, finished work, thought I'd nip down the lakes, go and see the lads, see what's going on. Keep your hand in. I used to do it every night after work. Sometimes go down there before I had anything to eat. But I remember I went up, I think Rob was in the chair swim at the top end of the lake, and I went round, a cup of tea and a smoke with him, and we was just sitting there, summer's evening. The lake weren't fishing particularly good, and Rob was hoping the fish would turn up in the snags. I think at the time Terry had sort of backed off from there because of the algae and the fishing had got a bit slower.
Did all lakes do it, or was it just that?
Just that one. They're taking a bit of a battering in the spring, aren't they? So, but I remember just sitting there with Rob, like you do, talking shit, talking about fishing and whatever you do. And I remember there's a couple of lads on Trumpton no one seemed to know who they were.
Which is the point on the right hand side, the big point.
Yeah, and they'd come down. A couple of Northerners. No one seemed to know them, but the ones that spoke to them said they seemed all right and that lot. But yeah, it's really weird. Yateley, very quiet lake. Everyone being stealthy. You know, the boilie approach worked well, pinging them out like. You know, fishing spots within spots, trying to take the paint off your marker float, getting it all bang on and everything. And everyone was stealthy. I remember, I think the year before, the bloke I mentioned called Nigel had caught ever before me. He spotted out a bucket of bait, and that was unheard of. And I think it might have been Rob or someone had said, "What's that northern monkey up to? What's he doing? Putting all that bait?" And he caught Evan the next day. But yeah, funny enough, sitting there watching. In this quiet area, Yateley, like, frightened to make too much noise, talking in whispers, the Yateley whispers they call it. And you almost heard this like sound, like a bit like a golf ball split in the air sort of sound, and then this big. It's like, what the?
What was that?
What was that? And then another one, and another one. And I remember Rob going, "What are them northern monkeys up to? What are they doing?" And yeah, they was using like whopper droppers, and I think they'd spent all day sitting there making these like balls up, bargee balls, ground violin, ground bait sort of thing. They'd had them all out on the Trumpton's boards, dried out or whatever, and then they decided to wage war and bait their spots that evening with it, and it was like a bombardment, like
to completely against the grain.
Oh yeah, everyone's all quiet and sitting there watching the water and slapping mosquitoes and that, and then suddenly it's like someone bombing the lake, like the Americans have turned up, you know. And I think, oh, whatever, yeah, interesting.
Are you gonna catch?
Yeah, maybe. You know, I don't think Rob felt that confident for him, but.
And then he hit his words.
But yeah, the next day I went to work, and then I come down the lake after work. Obviously, again, no mobile phones. You know, you don't know till you walk around the lake. That's how you stayed in touch. And what's happening on? Have you heard? Oh, no.
You heard?
Yeah, suppose you've heard.
Yeah.
And old Loey's had Ever and Chunky. Who's Loey? Oh, mate, he's in waiting man's. Apparently, that morning he's had a take, and fishers weeded him up. So they've got the boat out, he's gone out, got the fish out of the weed, turned out to be Ever. And while he was out in the boat, his other rod someone had put to one side and stood against a tree, loosened the clutch off, or it was already loose, whatever. And he's got Ever in, done the photos, they're all stood around having a chat and cups of tea and all that lot. And while they're doing that, the other rod starts clicking off in the bush, like.
Unreal.
Yeah. That was Chunky, like.
I
mean, it wasn't. Chunky wasn't over £40 at the time, but still, you know.
Still a Yateley fish, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
So it proved
2 fish in a 12-fish lake.
Yeah.
Like braced one on each rod, and they'd bombed the hell out of it the night before with these ground bait balls. So I sort of took note. You know, there'd been a few bites that summer when the fishing had got hard. You know, over particles. So I was starting to think about particles, but how to get them in the lake. And it's like a bit of a penny dropping moment. Yeah, you can mix them up with ground bait and that, catapult them out like them boys did.
So you applied it in your own fishing in the end?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit later. I noticed the route the fish were taking between the gate swim, which was receiving a lot of bait at weekends. A couple of lads, 2 blokes were doubled up in there every weekend. This is back in the days of Yateley, people tended to leave swims alone if someone was working them. You know, a bit of etiquette went on. And these 2 lads kept putting a lot of maples and boilies out. They weren't fishing far out, and a chap called Desi, Desi Swim's named after. He was baiting that swim with buckets of whatever he likes to use. I think at the time it might have been hemp with liquidised mackerel in a bucket left in a greenhouse for a day, so it stunk like it was one of them. Take the bucket off the lid while you're out there on the lilo and dump it, like, you know. That's I think how he used to get it in the water because you didn't want to smell it. But yeah, he'd had a couple of bites during the scratching time with the algae in the water and that. So the route between them, the ideal area to be was in the island swim, like halfway across the route they was using between the Desi spot and the gate swim. So there's northeasterly due to blow in, and August bank holiday weekend, so I could get a few nights in. And I think I had a couple of days before that like where there's no work, so I could get down a couple of days early, so I could get a good session in the island swim, and that was it. I was gonna wage war with the, what was it called, them bargee balls, and I think I put something.
You're gonna ring the dinner bell.
Yeah, ring the dinner bell, as they say. Yeah, I think I made up each day 75 balls, like about the size of that cup.
Yeah.
Little whopper dropper, put them out, fired boilies around them as well. Like for each rod I was fishing 2 different spots, and I think it was the Saturday lunchtime. I was just sitting in pole position, Jeff Pink was in there sort of socialising, my rods were out in the island, and I just received a 1-noter on lunchtime on a Saturday, like absolutely ripping off. Like run up there, bent into a fish. I think you got a picture of it up here. You have to click through
Josh,
a few. Fish called Pearly Tail.
No, that's...
Yeah, that one there. Yeah. And I remember by the time I got to the rod, I looked at a couple of rod lengths off the back of the island in the island swim, and it was heading out towards Trumpton's Bar at the time. Again, lines cut up. Luckily, the algae had killed a lot of the weed off, so this was an open water battle. I wasn't battling a fish pulling through a lot of weed and that.
Still tire him out, basically.
Yeah. So, like a decent, like open water battle, and nervous. You don't know what you got on the end, do you? Hoping it could be this half a fish that still remained uncaught through all the spring madness and everything. I think Desi probably lost the halfer actually, because I see it with a little scuff on its nose a few days after he'd lost the fish. But yeah, I didn't know what was on the end, and there's a crowd behind me because everyone who was sitting around Jeff's swim had sort of come up to see what this Neville whizzing was all about. And yeah, this one came in Pearly Tail, one of the smaller mirrors, 25 something, I think it was 25-12, which was a bit of a relief because obviously at the time, with the closed season being the thing, and I'd caught a few fish in that, but I hadn't caught anything since.
Outside
so I was starting to get a bit of stick, you only catch them during a, typical thing. Don't rise to it, just get on with it. And I managed to catch this one, and so I was.
So this was, what time of the year was this?
August bank holiday, end of August.
Right.
So I'd gone from May to the end of August without a bite. And then this one was like,
a bit of a relief,
but over a different method, like fishing bottom baits over a lot of bait, Yeah.
So the next fish that came along, what was your next bite after that?
After this bite, I decided not to put any more of the big balls ground bait out. The fish were there to be, they was on me. So I think this bite must have been on the Sunday lunchtime, to correct myself. And August bank holiday being a Monday. So I had like a couple more nights ahead of me because I didn't have to go to work till the Wednesday, so I could fish till the Tuesday. Yeah, the next bite came on the Monday evening. Like I think it had just gone dark. Desi had walked down from his swim and he was chatting to me. I think Alan Cooper had moved into pole position after Jeff had left on the Monday. And we was all sat in my swim, it was the one in between, and I got what you call the Yateley liner, so low bobbing up to the top, hold for a bit, pull it out the clip. You sort of like, is it? And then they just sort of drop down slowly. Folklore, you can't see it on this fish, like the normal Yateley fish have got like worn out fins on the bottoms. We always had that thing that they swam along with their bellies on the bottom trying to detect lines and that. But yeah, the Yateley liners were pretty good. Like they'd pull right up, hold for a bit, and then slowly drop all the way back to exactly where you put your bob in. And I remember just in the dark, one of them liners come, and I remember it's like the film Poltergeist, the little girl goes there here. That's what it's like. And that was the first thing after this bite. It's like they're back. They're on me again,
So this was a boilie approach again?
No, I'd still fish in the same area, but I'd stop putting the ground bait out. I was just topping it up with a few boilies. I'd only recast once after this fish. And, so there's every chance that a 25 pounder hadn't eaten all of what I put out. So it's trying not to disturb it. But yeah, it's every 20 minutes after that first liner, I've got the same liner on the same rod, and it's just like this is going on and on and on. And the lads like left sort of 11:30, 12ish, something like that, go back to their bivvies, get their heads down because they was going to work the next morning because, being a Monday night bank holiday, they're off to work on a Tuesday morning early. And I remember sitting there and bobbin was going all the way up to the top and then dropping down like slowly, real slowly, back to where it was. And I remember, I think it must have been just after midnight, maybe 12:30, something like that. The bobbin did the same, straight up to the top. It held there, and then I thought it's just going to drop back down. It just went like someone cut the line.
Yeah.
I thought there's one on that.
Yeah.
And I remember I jumped out of bed, took the line out of the cliff on the spool, on the rod, like tighten the clutch up, wound down to it. I remember probably about 50 yards out where I was fishing to.
Yeah.
And I remember winding as if the line had been cut, and I actually thought something's done my line, it's been piked or something. And I'm literally, it must have been right under my feet, this fish, because there's big snags to the right of the island swim, and I think that's where it was heading. And literally, as I caught up with it, the rod just arced over in the margins, and I've got one. There's one on the end here, and that was it. The fight was all under the rod tip. It come up to the surface, explode, go down. It didn't take much line, didn't go far. It seemed like a heavy fish, but it didn't have a lot of power behind it. It kept going to the bottom, rub its face to the bottom, come back up to the top, and this went on for a bit. Waves were going out, and I can remember thinking to myself, I hope this ain't ever again, because because there was a little bit of muttering. You shouldn't be on here. And I can remember the waves going across the lake, and obviously you've got these lads each side that have got to go to work the next morning. I remember thinking, shut up. Every time it don't want anyone to know, because if it's ever, I'm just going to take the hook out and let it swim off. Yeah, just going to let it swim off. And I remember stuck my net out, to this fish that was coughing water, got it in the net, pulled it back, and I remember in the moonlight, there's like a northeasterly wind blowing in as well, thinking, what is this? And I remember there's two scales on the side, and I thought, is that little scar on Heather that lights up a little bit? I'm thinking, no, I've gone and caught her again, haven't I? This ain't going to go down too well, is it? And I went for get a torch. We didn't have torches then, little mag lights, I remember getting that. I put it in my mouth and lit it up. I remember thinking, scales, it's a mirror. It's not Heather. Which one is it? I remember parting the net, and I just see that tail there, a bit missing off it. It's half tail, uncaught for 2.5 years, and it's looking fat and big in the net. And I remember thinking, I can get someone now. So I remember going, you didn't have to shout. I went, Desi, and he went, yeah, I heard, mate. Be round in a minute. And he came round, and we got Cooper Man out of his bed, and I think we got Rob. We actually had to do a lap of the lake to find someone who had some film in the camera. So Cooper Man, I think, had 8 pictures, and nobody else on the complex or that side of the road had any film in their cameras, which was mad. 8 pictures. It's middle of the night, and I think a couple of people said to me, it's like we'd weighed it as 41.4. It's the first time Arthur had been over 40, so it's a bit mind blowing, Yeah. It's like, wow, there's 3 40s in here. This is a mega lake, And we. It's all and I was getting encouraged to sack it for the night, and it's bit of blue-green algae still in the water, not good water quality, low oxygen. Baby Basil from the North Lake had died in a sack that weekend, or that week, I'd seen it carted off in a wheelbarrow. It's actually stuffed now. A friend of mine who carted off in a wheelbarrow has got it set up in a glass case and that, and I thought, I ain't keeping this.
No.
This fish ain't been caught for 2.5 years. The water quality's bad. It's the middle of the night. It's not going to be light enough to take decent photos until 8-9 o'clock.
The low oxygen
People,
levels.
I was being encouraged to wait on and nip up the shops and get a film. You need to get good pictures of this. This is a new Yateley 40, and that. I was like, no, we're doing it now.
Responsible angler.
Doing it now, and fair play to Alan Cooper. He done 8 pictures of that fish. I think a couple in the water, 6 on the bank, and that's it. Not the best of pictures, but we know what the fish looks like, because
we're going to see now. Actually,
other people do it. Yeah, like you see top lobe of the tail there. I suppose a bit of Yate history there. First time that one went over £40, and everyone, not everyone. A few of us had seen it in the snags and said it looked over £40 and all that lot, but no one knew because it hadn't been caught at that weight. And that was it, it's like we done that. I remember the group of lads, probably a dozen of us, stood in the island swim after. I remember Rob standing there, and because everyone was just standing there looking out into the darkness after we'd let it go. And I remember everyone was quiet, not saying a word. And then I remember Rob just saying, like, we all stood in awe of the car park lake, and it, you know, it's sort of like that stayed in my head, because it's like mega 340s, 12 fish in there, and 3 of them over 40. Awesome. But yeah, lads sort of departed through the night, and I was just sat there like buzzing my head off, like what the hell's happened here, you know. I've had them fish in the spring, and I blanked for a bit, you know, through the summer months, high summer, and then suddenly I've caught 2 mirrors out the car park lake in less than like 36 hours, something like that. And I'm sitting there, and I could hear a few fish slosh out like in the area, so I thought, I'm going to sling a rod back out there. Might as well, and I'm going to sit here all night without a rod on that spot if they're on it. So, yeah, I literally put a new rig and bait on, tossed it out to the same area, got the drop. Thought it might have gone a little bit further because we didn't do wrapping sticks, or you know, occasionally you might walk them out up the bank and things like that, but you tended to do it by muscle memory and sound and that a lot. But yeah, I thought, yeah, hit the lake, hit the bottom, must be roughly there.
It's presented.
I don't really care. I've caught 2. One of them's like half at 40 odd pound. I'm buzzing, like, you know. I remember putting the rod in the rest and putting the bobbin back on straight away and getting liners, so I'd had cast a little bit far through the area. And yeah, I think it's about 2 hours later I had a take, another carp on, a bit of a battle with it, and it was that common we see earlier, like that nice, like snake pitty looking common, you know, the big common. And I remember, I think I weighed it, it's 27.2. There's no films in anyone's cameras, it's dark, and I just thought, you know what, I've caught it before, I've got good pictures. Thought it's a bit of a mad moment, because I wouldn't have thought many people had done it. I just unhooked it, like, you know, weighed it to gain the weight, and I just let it go and swam off in the darkness. Didn't get anyone to witness it or anything. So yeah, in pretty much 36 hours of activity, I caught 3 out of the 12 fish that like session. And I remember, because it was a Tuesday, lads gone off to work, and back then people left their gear on the lakes, like come back and fish the next night, you know, just leave the gear in the swim. It wasn't frowned upon then, but I think it got more frowned upon when this lake started getting busier after what had happened. But yeah, I remember sitting there through the day, and Desi came back from work, right, and he walked in my swim, and I was just sitting there with the rods out, just drinking tea, like spoiling the day away, because I knew in my heart of hearts, that's it now. I've caught like the 3 big ones, like this is red card, you know, there's no excuse. And he actually said it to me, like, what are you doing here still, mate? You caught them, you'll catch ever again, you know, you need to go. And it was almost a little bit brutal the way he said it to me, but I remember it actually almost made me feel, I don't know, it sounds like bullying or something, like it almost made you feel like crying, but you had that sort of like, it's a really lump in the throat. It's quite a sad feeling really, because I actually thought, you know what, when I wind them rods in, I ain't fishing this lake anymore, and it had been such a good year, you know, like incredible. I'd gone from do I dare to I've done it. Like, you know,
mission
like,
accomplished.
Yeah, sort of 7 bites, 5 different fish, you know, and because I'd caught a couple of them, it showed that maybe I could be at risk of catching ever again. I might well have done if I'd stayed in that swim, because that's the route of fish we're using and that. And funnily enough, I think the following day Ever was caught by one of them lads in the gate swim, which probably threw her a little bit off route. And then about a week later, my mate Maggot, the late Maggot now, he caught her out the bar swim as well. So Ever done a couple of quick captures after that in the autumn. I think even later than that, November time, I think Terry caught her then. I think she'd done 7 captures that year, Ever did. So, but most of them were during traditional season, so, you know, it's up to people what they want to think of it then.
But you'd proved you'd caught in the close season or something. But you caught outside of that as well, so you proved the point as well. It was nice to almost have them fish to say you'd done it. So was that the end of it then, really, for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was it. The end of that day was, when I packed up, took my gear away. That was it. I was, I wasn't going to be fishing. Yeah, it's quite a sad feeling to not be fishing the car park again. Like, it's all end of August, isn't it? September. There's still good autumn left, but there's a North Lake, so I did a bit of work, and I did a couple of sessions on the North Lake, and we'll probably go into that a bit more another day.
Yeah, well, what we're going to do, that's all that slide's done now, isn't it? So basically, you red carded yourself off by the sound of things. You've done a couple of little sessions over the North just to maybe get a little bit of a taster for it, and that's going to be the next chapter that we're going to sit and talk about.
Might as well, haven't we? There's quite a bit to talk about there.
Well, this is why we've done these. We've sort of put them into, especially as we've gone on the dark side, as you called it. We're doing one lake per series now. Maybe towards the end we might double them up again. But because this is such a history lake, we wanted to just devote one series just to that lake. And again, we got North next week.
Well, whenever we do it, but it's.
Yeah, because you're going to be fishing now, because we just had the announcement that fishing is from the 28th or 29th.
29th, I think it is, and what we now, we're on the 18th, 19th, so
10
about
days
10 days before clubbing season starts again.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I'll probably give it a week, I think, before I go. But yeah, it's going to be mad. But listen, this one blew me away, mate. I was just sat in awe listening to you about this, about the car park. That's blown me away, and I hope everyone's going to enjoy it as well. So thanks for coming in.
It's all right.
Look forward to the next one. Are you ready for it?
Be seeing you.